Hi, I'm Dick Miller, and I'm here with Jeff Smith, and we are semi-regulars monthly, I think. Monthly. And we have a few points we'll cover today. I just want to make the viewers aware that Jeff and I discussed getting together on a regular basis. It's been, what, 3 years ago, probably. And it was based on the concept that we would talk about the Wisconsin Senate, what's going on, and try to have Jeff kind of give us some idea of his position on matters that are pertinent and current in the Senate. And you know, for the past several months, I've turned to Jeff and I said, "What's going on in the Senate?" And he has had to say, "Not much." But I want to apologize to the viewers because I'm going to continue to ask him that question because that is, I think, the role of this program is to keep people in the viewing area informed of what is going on in the Senate. And so please bear with me. And I'm going to ask him that question first of all. Then I'm going to follow up with another quick question. So tell us what's up. What's going on?
What's going on? Not much. So we've been out of session since the 1st of March, and how many people get paid for a full year and only have to work 2 months out of the year? Not many, and I apologize for that as well. The majority party chooses to not do anything. The majority party in the legislature chooses not to do anything because they are politically stuck with the idea that if they do something that's useful to the population, also is good for the governor, who is of the other party. So that doesn't work. That doesn't work well when it comes to what we should be doing for the citizens of this state.
Kind of with the idea that we don't want someone else to look good.
Yeah.
And I think another facet is that it kind of keeps everybody away for several months from anything that may appear controversial too.
I suppose.
So that won't become a part of the discussion during the campaign season.
Yeah.
So my follow-up question is, it's not an easy one, but I know you thought about it. What are your druthers to this kind of a system that we've been in now for a few years?
How much time do we have, Dick? All right, so
I want to.
Yeah.
Maybe I should limit you there.
Yeah. So let's just start with the fact that think about Congress in Washington D.C. and how far representatives have to go to work in Washington D.C. They got to arrange flights. They've got to fly there. They've got. I mean, it's a much bigger deal. But guess what? They don't go out of session in the 1st of March of an election year. They keep going back and forth throughout the year, right into September, which is this month. In fact, I know in fact, for good reasons, that the Congress is actually planning on going back for something, I don't know what, the 1st of October, first part of October, in an election year. They do that. There's no excuse that we can't, in the state wide legislature, operate the same way. Just don't be out of session simply because we don't want to, like you just said, either have to deal with controversial subjects in an election year or give credit to somebody else whom they don't want to give credit to. So a couple other things I think people should know is that when bills are introduced, for instance, and you have public hearings, the Republican Party, who has been gerrymandered to be in the majority for over 10 years now, and we're in our second decade that they have done this, starting this election year. They choose to not have hearings on bills authored by Democrats, period. And I shouldn't say never, because 1.9% of bills introduced by Democrats get a public hearing. I had one bill given a public hearing in this past session out of 88, I think it was. To give you why that shouldn't have to be, is that in 2009 and 10, Democrats were in charge. I was in the assembly then. I was a committee chair. Our average of public hearings on Republican bills was 80%.
So
80%. It does not need. It's just a public hearing. It doesn't mean they're going to get the vote that they want. It may not pass, but
there was daylight, so to speak.
Well, the public
bills.
deserves to hear what the options are. The public deserves to have that public hearing. So all of these things come together, that we're not working. We're not working at least the way it was intended to be.
Now, timetable, what is a reasonable period of time to recess prior to an election? What would you think?
Well, again, looking at the model of Congress, I mean, it doesn't mean they're not campaigning this whole year. Of course, we know Congress. I mean, they are raising money every 2 years. The U.S. representative has to be reelected, just like they are in the state assembly and here in Wisconsin. So they're campaigning when they're home. But then there are weeks when they still go back and take care of business, because things come up. The country just doesn't come to a standstill, and neither does the state. And there's things that we should be doing. For instance, and I know you want to talk about this, there is a $5 billion surplus that we are looking at, which is really good. That means the economy, despite all of this politics that gets in the way, Governor Evers and others have made sure that we still are operating, and the economy's been coming back better than we expected. So what should we do with that? Well, right now we're sitting on it because the legislature refuses to do anything, and the governor has proposed putting at least a portion. He has had a couple proposals, and they gavelled out a special session on it, right? They gavelled in, gavelled out. We had 13 seconds, not a chance to even have a discussion. But his latest proposal has been, at least going into this school year, we need to consider the funding of our schools. And so he has proposed $2 billion of that to be adopted right now for a change in our formula and making sure that our schools are funded properly. So we could be doing things like that.
Well, and I think that's interesting. It's kind of a timely thought, because I think throughout the country there's a shortfall of teachers, and at least nationally we hear discussion about wages aren't competitive with many other professions, and I would assume that with that kind of money there might be opportunity to work in that area to some degree.
Well, and not necessarily. I guess it's up to the school districts, in some regard, right? But most of this money goes towards, for instance, and I will read off of some of these thoughts in here. Bolstering underfunded special ed programs. That is like the number one issue with school districts, in that we as a state have made the promise of, yes, this is a mandate, special education, and more than ever it has become a specialty within public education, something they do. It's necessary for lots of good reasons I don't need to go into, but we aren't doing that. We're far from paying for that. The school districts end up paying for it. This money would pay for 90% reimbursement by the 26-27 school year. It would be a graduated funding of special education. That's a big deal. That frees up money for the regular classroom. Raises revenue limits for school districts by $800 million. It's a whole nother discussion we should have about revenue limits, which I consider to be anti-local control. But it would give $350 per pupil in the first year and $650 per student in the second year. $250 million to support student mental health care. We've had a lot of issues, especially since the pandemic, of helping our students come back and get back into the right frame of mind for learning. And $10 billion annually in categorical aid to bolster literacy programs, which is, and I know even my Republican colleagues have introduced all sorts of ideas related to raising our literacy capabilities, which we all, I think, can agree is so important for our students in the first place. And then there's some after-school programs and this one I think is really good though. Allow districts to rehire retired teachers and staff. Unfortunately, we went down this pike of, we don't want retired teachers to have to come back or be able to come back into the school district as substitutes even to be paid when they're already earning their retirement and pension. They earn that, by the way. That is their money, but unfortunately there's that idea out there that they're actually milking that off the taxpayer, and they're not. But who would be best in our school classrooms than trained retired teachers for substitute purposes and long-term subs and when we really need them? Because you can ask any school district, any administrator and leader in the school districts, and they'll tell you they can't find substitute teachers. And we don't want just anybody going to that classroom and just, throwing a movie on the screen and let them go. So,
Well, while you touch upon that, some of the states, I know some of the southern states have been in the news for coming up with plans to deal with teacher shortages. I don't think I have been made aware of anything that has come from Governor Evers in that respect. I'm going to make an assumption that the governor, who has I think quite a solid basis in education, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he sure does, yeah.
I would assume that he supports the idea of educated, qualified teachers, and not to, what should I say, decrease the quality of preparation. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the legislature has taken a complete opposite tack there. Rather than bringing back the idea that our teachers are professionals, and not only are they professionals, but they have the future in their hands. And we should treat them as such, that this is such an important profession. When my kids were in school and I first got more engaged in education and what's going on in our system, there were so many students coming out of the university system. They were competing for these jobs. And now it has dwindled because of the lack of respect. They can do a lot other things without having to put up with the lack of respect and better pay doing something else. We need to treat it as a profession. And slightly different, not quite off the subject, but I was in a roundtable discussion about daycare recently, because that is a huge issue as well, something worth talking about. The child care in this state and in this country actually is really lacking. It's hard to get into child care, and that's one of the reasons that people are having trouble, businesses are having trouble finding people to fill the positions they need, because people are having to stay home more during those developmental years of birth to 6 years old. So in that roundtable, a person brought up, a person I have great respect for, that has been in this child care business for a full career, made the comment that, when are we going to start to acknowledge that the greatest developmental time of any human being is between birth and 6 years old? And yet we're willing to pay little or very little or poverty wages or part-time wages to a teenager to work in a daycare center to watch your child while you're at work, when instead we should be concentrated on professionals who are trained to help continue that development that may or may not be happening at home or outside of that center. And what a difference that would make for all of us in the United States, including the workforce.
Well, and I think, maybe take it a step further. You may not agree. As we look at the quality of teachers, I share with this particular person's belief. I've been taught the same thing, that used to be 1 through 7,
Yeah.
that age group. Those people at that age are able to absorb more, to learn more, than when they get to be 14 or 15. And it almost appears like we need to be putting our emphasis there, and yet it's so easy to put our emphasis in high school.
Yeah.
And many of those kids reach high school and they haven't really developed the learning capacity or capability and so forth to do well in high school. And then there's a lot of discouragement, I think, once they get to high school. It's just like languages. When do you learn your language? As a junior in high school? You don't. When you're 7, 8 years old is
so
when
much easier. Yeah.
So much easier, yeah. And some of us, like myself, have trouble with English, let alone taking French or Latin. When I was in school, Latin was the language that was popular. I don't know why, but and today with so many more people who have come to this country who speak different languages, and English is quasi-universal, but in this country, Spanish is a very popular language, and the more of us who can speak the language, that would be good. But I guess I had to bring up the value of we underplay not only the value of daycare, we undervalue the need for quality in elementary schools.
We do. We definitely do. Kindergarten is no longer nap time.
No, well, four-year-olds go to kindergarten.
That's
now.
right. And now I even hear there's some talk for 3K. So it's truly understood that we as a society can do so much better if we have trained professionals with our children when we're at work, continuing that development that you may have started at home.
And for you, I don't know about your family, but most in my age group, there weren't a lot of working moms. Moms were home, much more so. And they were there when the kids came home from school and provided them with that snack.
Yeah.
And how was your day?
Yeah.
And what did you do? And that kind of communication, that's part of the whole learning experience. And oftentimes out of necessity to some degree, not always, both husband and wife or the couple is working. They're away from the home when the kids come home. Yeah, somehow, and I don't, for our audience, I don't pretend to have a plan or a suggestion in terms of how we get this quality daycare, because it costs money to get quality.
Certainly it does.
Daycare.
Certainly it does. And I don't know what the perfect solution is too. One suggestion was we should treat it just like we do K-12 education now and make it a public thing that that they're paid through. But I'm not suggesting that. I think that's a long ways down the road if that were even possible. But somehow we do have to figure this out, and it's going to have to, I think it's going to be a partnership, public-private partnership, because it is so important, not just so the parents can work, but like I just described, how preparing children for their future. Both of those things we can address by making sure that all the way from, you say 1-year-old, through whenever they choose not to go, certainly through 12th grade, maybe through technical college, whenever they choose to stop going to school and learning and taking on that lifelong profession after that. But we should be preparing them for that.
I just touched base on something you said earlier. It just came to mind here. When my kids were in school, there was if I'm not mistaken, the state paid for the entire cost of special education. And special education means something different today than it did when I was in school.
It's very
special education means that there are kids in every school that learn differently. We don't all learn the same way. And so you have to, in order for them to be successful, you've got to help them develop the abilities to learn in their way, so they can learn to their utmost. And when the funding slowed down or dropped basically, the schools are not extending those services to some of the kids that used to receive that service.
So another thing to remember, though, is how much has changed. When I was young,
that's been quite a while ago, isn't it?
Yeah, there were the Northern Center in Chippewa Falls,
sure.
and there was a Southern Center, and there were 3 or 4 places like that in the state of Wisconsin. Those closed down.
Nothing replaced them.
Nothing really replaced them other than homes and other places for them to like that for people like that to go. They went to the schools. They all, the schools needed to provide them an education, and don't take this as meaning that was a bad thing or the wrong thing to do. It was probably the right thing to do. And the thing that has been pointed out to me is it also helped the kids they went to school with to have more empathy for people who struggled. I've heard principals tell me this and superintendents tell me this, that kids these days learn to help kids throughout their, they treat them like their own siblings. They, look out for them, and something that we never really had that experience with. So there's a value to that.
There's a positive there.
Very, yeah, and so that's also something though that has become a greater expense. There's that value, but it's actually cheaper than running a Northern Center though.
Oh yes, I remember
if
when
we
they
put the
closed,
money into the schools to make up for what they had to take in, because they do need a lot of special care that they did not need when you and I were in school.
Well, and I think the point I was trying to make is that there were a lot of kids that didn't have extreme learning difficulties, but they had stumbling blocks they needed to get over in order to be successful.
Right.
And I know many of these people went on to be very not only further education but very successful, but they needed that little extra boost. And I think it's hard to get that boost today from the system partially due to the funding probably. One other thing, and I don't know if the governor has said anything about this, but from time to time we hear discussion about funding to private schools. Has he said anything recently in terms of his position on that, or?
Well, I don't think
knowledge?
his position has changed, and it's not any different than my own. We have public money to pay for public education. I will hear people say, well, we want our kids to have choices. They have always had choices. They've always had choices. My family, my 2 older siblings, they went to the Catholic high school, but we all went through the Catholic grade school. And I went there through 7th grade, but then I chose, and it was my choice. I had this discussion, sat down with my parents and said, I want to go to the public junior high at the time, and then high school. Turned out to be a great choice for me. It worked out well for me, and my 4 siblings after me actually followed suit. We had those choices. Those choices were always there. And there's choices in moving from one public school to another. Every year there's open enrollment. There's so many choices, but public money should not go to a private institution that doesn't have the same rules or restrictions
And
or expectations that your public money would have in a public school. The public school is there for everyone to have the same opportunity without being pressured by either a certain religious belief or certain other ideas that the private school is there for.
I'm trying to think in terms of public roads, if there is money given to private roads. I don't think so.
I don't think so, no. No.
Yeah, I just don't think that happens. So this is a highly combustible subject, I think.
I know it is, but
and
you also need to realize that the way this has gone, I consider the wrong way, it's just gotten worse and worse.
Yeah.
The voucher program, that money for voucher program comes off the top before they start disseminating the money back to our public school districts.
Rather than the other way around.
Yeah. And now we have a proposal. We have proposals out there. They want to open it up to everybody, no matter their ability to pay, to have a voucher and choose where you go. Chaos is what I call that.
I would say that would throw everything into chaos. I think the whole idea of citizenship has been solely supported and based on public schools and preparation to do your civic duty. And somehow this takes away from that.
Yeah.
And we're getting to the end here. I was hoping to talk a little bit about upcoming election and requirements in terms of voting and so forth, but maybe we can squeeze that in next month.
Yeah, right
and
before
we'll
election.
be close to the election. And I would thank Jeff for being here today, and I thank you viewers for tuning in, and we'll try to be with you next month.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.